Hi guys, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you find this content informative, please subscribe to the channel for more updates. Most athletes learn very quickly that criticism comes with the territory. But every once in a while, a single comment lands so hard that it shakes an entire sport. And that's exactly what happened when NBA legend Shaquille O'Neal publicly weighed in on Angel Reese. Now, criticism from fans is one thing, criticism from social media is another. But when it comes from a four-time NBA champion, a Hall of Famer, and one of the most recognizable voices in basketball, people pay attention. What could have been just another sports debate suddenly exploded into one of the biggest conversations in women's basketball. Within hours, fans were taking sides, analysts were arguing on television, social media was flooded with reactions. Some believed Shaq was simply being honest, others felt he had crossed a line. But while everyone else was debating what he said, one person remained at the center of the storm, Angel Reese herself. Many expected her to ignore the comments, others thought she might fire back emotionally. Instead, she delivered a response that caught almost everyone off guard. Calm, direct, and unapologetic, Reese made it clear she wasn't backing down, and the moment she spoke, the conversation grew even bigger. Because somehow, as has happened so many times before, another name found its way into the headlines, CaitlinClark. What started as a disagreement between a Hall of Fame basketball icon and one of the WNBA's fastest-rising stars suddenly became part of a much larger debate. A debate about media narratives, player comparisons, double standards, and the future of women's basketball itself. So what exactly did Shaq say? Why did Angel Reese's response create such a massive reaction? And why does CaitlinClark keep getting pulled into stories she isn't even part of? The answers reveal far more than anyone expected. The controversy didn't begin with a heated argument. It started with a few words from one of basketball's most respected figures. When Shaquille O'Neal publicly questioned Angel Reese's standing in the current women's basketball conversation, the reaction was immediate. This wasn't a random social media user sharing an opinion. This wasn't a sports blogger looking for clicks. This was Shaq, a Hall of Famer whose opinions carry enormous weight throughout the basketball world. According to reports and discussions that quickly spread across sports media, Shaq raised concerns about whether the praise and attention surrounding Reese accurately reflected her performance at the professional level. The comments focused on her production, efficiency, and overall impact compared to the level of recognition she was receiving. For some fans, the criticism wasn't shocking. They argued that professional athletes should be judged by results and statistics, regardless of popularity. In their view, Shaq was simply saying what many people had already been thinking. But others saw the situation very differently. Critics argued that Reese was still early in her professional career and was being held to a standard that many young players, especially in men's basketball, rarely face. Some felt the comments overlooked her strengths and dismissed the progress she had already made since entering the league. Almost overnight, the debate spread everywhere. Sports shows dedicated entire segments to the topic. Podcasts broke down every word. Social media timelines became battlefields filled with arguments, reactions, and hot takes. Suddenly, what began as one opinion had transformed into a league-wide conversation. And perhaps the most surprising part was that nobody seemed willing to let the story fade away. The basketball world waited to see what would happen next. Would Angel Reese ignore the criticism? Would she respond through social media, or would she confront the comments directly? As it turned out, she had already made her decision. And what she said next changed the entire conversation. If there was one thing people expected after Shaq's comments, it was silence. Many young athletes choose not to engage when a Hall of Famer criticizes them publicly. The risk is obvious. Respond too aggressively and you're labeled emotional. Say nothing, and some people assume the criticism must be true. Angel Reese found herself trapped between those two possibilities as the debate continued to grow. But instead of avoiding the spotlight, she stepped directly into it. When Reese finally addressed the controversy, she didn't sound rattled. She didn't sound defensive. Most importantly, she didn't sound like someone looking for sympathy. Her response was measured, confident, and focused on one message: her story is still being written. Rather than arguing over every statistic or trying to win a public battle with Shaq, Reese pointed to the work happening behind the scenes. She spoke about the adjustments required to succeed at the professional level, the lessons she continues to learn, and the challenges that come with transitioning from college superstar to WNBA player. For supporters, that response mattered. They saw an athlete refusing to let outside opinions define her future. They saw someone willing to acknowledge areas for improvement while still believing in her own potential. In a sports culture where confidence is often mistaken for arrogance, Reese made it clear she wasn't apologizing for believing in herself. But she didn't stop there. Reese also touched on the unique pressures facing women athletes in today's sports landscape. She suggested that public criticism often carries a different tone when directed toward young female stars. The spotlight, she argued, can sometimes become more intense than the actual basketball being played on the court. Those comments immediately sparked another wave of discussion. Fans debated whether she had a point. Analysts weighed in from every angle. And as the conversation expanded beyond Shaq's original remarks, a familiar pattern began to emerge. Because once again, another superstar's name started appearing in headlines, debates, and social media posts everywhere. And that name was CaitlinClark. By this point, the conversation was no longer just about Shaquille O'Neal and Angel Reese. Because whenever a major story involving Reese gains traction, it seems to follow a familiar path. Sooner or later, CaitlinClark's name enters the discussion, even when she had nothing to do with the original controversy. And that's exactly what happened here. The connection between Reese and Clark stretches back to one of the most memorable moments in recent college basketball history. Their showdown on the national stage captured millions of viewers and introduced a rivalry that quickly grew beyond the court. What started as a competitive matchup between two elite athletes soon evolved into one of the most talked-about storylines in sports. Since then, every achievement, every interview, every controversy, and every headline involving one player somehow finds its way back to the other. Part of that is simple reality. Both athletes have become faces of a rapidly growing league, both attract enormous attention, and both have passionate fan bases eager to defend their favorite player at every opportunity. But there's another reason this keeps happening. In today's media environment, comparisons generate engagement. Engagement generates clicks, and clicks generate revenue. The moment Reese's response to Shaq began making headlines, many discussions immediately shifted toward Clark. Some people compared their statistics, others compared their popularity, some debated their impact on the WNBA. Before long, what started as a conversation about criticism became another chapter in a rivalry narrative that refuses to disappear. What's interesting is that Clark herself wasn't participating in any of it. She wasn't responding to Reese. She wasn't commenting on Shaq's remarks. She wasn't adding fuel to the debate, yet her name continued to dominate discussions across television, podcasts, and social media platforms. That reality reveals something important. The Reese-Clark storyline has become bigger than either player individually. It has become a symbol of larger conversations happening around women's basketball. And as the media continued pushing that narrative, many people began asking a question that couldn't be ignored. Was the rivalry becoming larger than reality itself? At some point, the focus shifted away from basketball. What began as a debate about Shaq's comments and Angel Reese's response slowly transformed into something much larger, a non-stop discussion about a rivalry that many believe has taken on a life of its own. The question is simple. Are Angel Reese and CaitlinClark truly rivals to the extent the media portrays them, or has the story become too valuable to let go? The answer may lie in how modern sports media works. Every major sports outlet competes for attention. Every podcast wants views. Every social media account wants engagement. And few stories generate more engagement than conflict. When two talented young stars have different personalities, different fan bases, and different journeys to success, the ingredients for a compelling narrative are already there. The Reese-Clark storyline checks every box. Since their memorable college championship showdown, nearly every interaction, real or imagined, has been analyzed, debated, and amplified. A routine foul becomes a national headline. A brief comment becomes a week-long discussion. Even stories where only one player is involved somehow circle back to the other. The cycle keeps repeating because people keep watching. Social media has only intensified the situation. Algorithms reward outrage. Extreme opinions travel faster than balanced ones. As a result, the loudest voices often dominate the conversation while the more nuanced perspectives get buried beneath the noise. What's remarkable is that many of the most heated debates aren't actually coming from the players themselves. In public appearances, both Reese and Clark have generally focused on basketball. Yet online, fan communities continue to battle over comparisons, accomplishments, and perceived slights. Every new controversy becomes another opportunity to revive the rivalry narrative. And that's where things get complicated. Because when a storyline becomes this profitable, it starts generating momentum of its own. The media covers it because audiences are interested. Audiences become interested because the media keeps covering it. But once the emotions, opinions, and headlines are stripped away, one thing remains. The numbers. And those numbers tell a story that might surprise a lot of people. Lost in all the headlines, arguments, and social media battles is a fact that often gets overlooked. Angel Reese is producing at a level that many players would love to reach. The problem is that numbers rarely generate as much attention as controversy. When most people discuss Reese, they focus on the debates surrounding her popularity, media coverage, or public image. But if you look strictly at what happens on the court, a different picture begins to emerge. Reese has established herself as one of the most dominant rebounders in professional basketball. Night after night, she battles for position, controls the glass, and creates extra possessions for her team. Those contributions don't always appear in highlight reels, but coaches and players understand their value. Her ability to consistently record double-doubles has become one of the defining features of her game. That kind of production requires effort, toughness, and consistency, qualities that cannot be manufactured by media attention or social media followers. Supporters point to these performances as proof that Reese's impact extends far beyond scoring. At the same time, her critics aren't entirely silent. They often highlight areas where she is still developing, including offensive efficiency and certain aspects of her overall game. Like many young professionals, Reese remains a work in progress. The transition from college dominance to professional success is rarely smooth, even for elite athletes. But that's exactly why the conversation around her can sometimes become misleading. Too often, discussions focus exclusively on weaknesses while ignoring strengths that are clearly visible to anyone watching the games closely. The reality is far more balanced than many headlines suggest. Angel Reese is not a finished product. She's a young player with undeniable strengths, areas to improve, and the potential to continue growing into one of the league's biggest stars. But no matter how impressive her rebounding numbers become, there is one comparison that always finds its way back into the conversation. And once that comparison starts, the discussion shifts from basketball performance to something much bigger. That's where CaitlinClark enters the picture once again. No matter where you stand in the Angel Reese debate, one reality has become impossible to ignore. CaitlinClark has changed the business of women's basketball in ways few athletes ever have. And that's not an opinion, it's something reflected in the numbers. Long before she played her first professional game, Clark was already drawing attention at a level rarely seen in the sport. Record-breaking television audiences followed her throughout college. Games became national events. Casual sports fans who had never watched women's basketball suddenly found themselves tuning in every week. Then she entered the WNBA. Almost immediately, ticket demand surged. Teams began moving games to larger arenas to accommodate crowds. Merchandise sales skyrocketed. Television ratings reached levels that league executives could only dream about a few years earlier. The impact extended far beyond one franchise. For decades, the WNBA had worked tirelessly to grow its audience. Clark's arrival accelerated that growth almost overnight. New sponsors entered the conversation, more national media coverage followed, discussions about future television deals became significantly larger than before. On the court, the attention brought its own challenges. Every opponent wanted to stop her, every arena was packed, every performance was scrutinized. Despite that pressure, Clark continued producing as both a scorer and playmaker, proving she could handle the spotlight that followed her everywhere. That's why so many analysts describe her influence as historic. But here's where the conversation often becomes distorted. Acknowledging Clark's enormous impact doesn't automatically diminish Angel Reese's contributions. Both players have helped bring unprecedented attention to women's basketball. Both have attracted passionate supporters, and both have played important roles in the league's recent growth. The difference is that Clark's influence has expanded beyond basketball statistics and into the business side of the sport itself. And yet, the most surprising part of her rise isn't the records, the crowds, or the endorsements. It's how she has responded when controversy keeps finding her name. Because while everyone else seemed eager to join the debate, CaitlinClark made a very different choice. Throughout the endless debates, viral clips, and social media battles, there is one detail that often gets overlooked. CaitlinClark has never publicly fueled the rivalry. In today's sports world, that is far more unusual than it sounds. Athletes are constantly presented with opportunities to respond to criticism, fire back at rivals, or capitalize on controversy. One carefully timed comment can dominate headlines for days. A subtle social media post can ignite an entire fan base. The temptation to join the conversation is enormous. Yet time and time again, Clark has chosen a different path. When questions about Angel Reese appear during interviews, she typically redirects the conversation back to basketball. When reporters ask about rivalries, she focuses on her team. When controversies explode online, she rarely adds to the noise. That pattern has remained remarkably consistent. Whether the story involved heated fan debates, physical play on the court, or comparisons between the league's biggest stars, Clark has largely avoided making herself part of the drama. Instead, she has repeatedly emphasized winning games, improving as a player, and helping her team succeed. For many fans, that restraint has become one of the most impressive aspects of her career. It's easy to stay quiet when everything is going well. It's much harder when your name is trending, millions of people are discussing you, and every microphone is waiting for a reaction. Clark has faced that situation repeatedly and has continued responding in much the same way. That doesn't mean she lacks confidence. In fact, her performances often speak louder than any public statement could. The confidence is visible in her shot making, her leadership, and her willingness to take responsibility during the biggest moments. She simply chooses to express it on the court rather than through headlines. And that decision may reveal something important about the current state of women's basketball. Because while fans, analysts, and media outlets continue debating rivalries and controversies, the league itself continues growing at a remarkable pace. Which raises a bigger question. What if this entire controversy was actually revealing something much larger than a disagreement between a few high-profile names? If there's one thing this entire controversy has exposed, it's just how much the WNBA has changed. A few years ago, a disagreement involving a current player might have generated a few headlines before quickly fading away. Today, a single comment from a basketball legend can dominate sports conversations for days. Fans debate it, analysts dissect it. Social media explodes with opinions. That kind of attention only exists because the league has entered a completely different era. The spotlight is brighter than ever. And with that spotlight comes pressure. Every missed shot is analyzed. Every post-game comment is scrutinized. Every interaction between star players becomes a potential headline. For athletes like Angel Reese and CaitlinClark, success no longer means simply performing on the court. It also means navigating an environment where millions of people are constantly watching, judging, and reacting. That's the reality of being the face of a growing sport. What's interesting is that the controversy itself may actually be evidence of progress. The fact that people care this much means women's basketball is commanding attention in ways it never has before. The league is attracting new viewers, larger sponsorships, bigger television audiences, and more media coverage than at any point in its history. But growth creates challenges. The media often wants rivalries, fans often choose sides, social media encourages conflict because conflict generates engagement. As a result, stories can sometimes become bigger than the actual events that created them. Yet through all the noise, one truth remains. The WNBA doesn't need one star, it doesn't need one storyline, and it doesn't need one player to succeed at another's expense. The league is strongest when multiple stars thrive together, pushing each other, competing fiercely, and helping elevate the game to new heights. And that's what makes this entire situation so fascinating. Because in the end, the biggest story was never Shaq's comment, Angel Reese's response, or even CaitlinClark's name appearing in the headlines. The biggest story is that women's basketball has become impossible to ignore. In the end, this story was never really about a single comment. What started with Shaquille O'Neal questioning Angel Reese quickly evolved into something much bigger, a conversation about expectations, pressure, media narratives, and the future of women's basketball itself. Angel Reese found herself at the center of a storm that could have easily overwhelmed a young player. Instead of backing away, she chose to respond directly. Whether people agreed with her or not, she made it clear that she was willing to stand behind her beliefs and defend the work she continues to put into her game. At the same time, CaitlinClark once again became part of a controversy she didn't create. Her name surfaced in headlines, debates, and social media arguments despite having no direct involvement in the original exchange. Yet throughout it all, she remained focused on basketball, following the same approach that has defined much of her professional career. And perhaps that's what makes this entire situation so revealing. The league is growing faster than ever. More fans are watching, more media outlets are paying attention, more money is entering the sport. But with that growth comes increased scrutiny, louder criticism, and an endless appetite for drama. The challenge moving forward will be separating genuine basketball discussions from manufactured controversy. Because the truth is, Angel Reese and CaitlinClark are not enemies, they are competitors, they are stars. And in different ways, both are helping bring unprecedented attention to the WNBA. Years from now, people may not remember every debate, every headline, or every viral social media argument. What they will remember is this era of women's basketball, the moment when the sport reached a new level of visibility and began capturing the attention of the entire sports world. And that's why this story matters. Not because of what Shaq said, not because of the arguments that followed, but because it showed just how powerful, influential, and impossible to ignore women's basketball has become.
If you made it this far, you already know this story is far from over. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this changes everything, or are people overreacting? Hit the like button if you enjoyed this breakdown. It really helps push videos like this out to more viewers. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next update, because things are moving fast and there's a lot more coming. I want to hear your take. Does this shift the balance, or will defenses find another way to respond? Share this video with someone who needs to see this, especially if they've been following this story closely. Turn on notifications so you're always the first to know when new content drops. If you've got a different perspective, drop it below. I read a lot of the comments and the discussions here are always interesting. Let me know what you think happens next, because this could go in a lot of directions. And if you enjoy content that breaks things down in a simple, engaging way, stick around. There's plenty more on the way. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.